What's up, guys? Going to review my 2021 Bass Open Series season. All right, y'all, from what you've probably figured out from my previous videos, as far as national tournaments this year, my focus was the Bass Open Series presented by Hobie. Of course, BASS has their own Bass Nation Kayak Series. There's KBF with their stuff. There was some other regional stuff that was out there available, but I wanted to put all my effort into the Bass Open Series this year, because to me, the ultimate goal in kayak fishing is to make the year-end Tournament of Champions. Top 50 anglers in the entire sport make it to that. They take the top 3 anglers from each tournament. There's 10 tournaments. That's 30, plus the top 19 finishers in the Angler of the Year standings. So I wanted to get in one way or the other through either finishing top 3 in an event or get into those, get in via the Angler of the Year points. So that's what I was after this year. I picked 5 events out of the 10 that they held. You got to keep your best 3 finishes. So I was all in on that, and that's what I was going to chase in 2021. So the 5 events I chose, I picked Broken Bow Lake in Oklahoma, which is kind of unknown on the national scene, but it is, to me, one of the most underrated lakes and one of my favorite lakes to fish. It's only about 3 hours from here. I picked the Lake Darnell event, which is here in Arkansas. Not really home waters to me. It's a couple hours down the road. It's on the Arkansas River, but close, so I picked that one. Sam Rayburn was a bucket list fishery for me that I'd never been to. Couldn't wait to get down there and fish that. Then I picked Lacrosse, which I've been to Lacrosse a few times before. I really like going up there. Just a unique place to fish. And then last but not least, I had Pickwick circled if I needed to go to Pickwick to try to get those last points to get in. I wanted to go anyway because I'd also never been to Pickwick, so it was on my bucket list. So I'm going to go through real quick, event by event, and kind of how the year went. Broken Bow was first. Very familiar there. I finished top 5 there a couple of times in some large regional events, a charity event they had there called the Beavers Bend Classic. So I was very confident going down there. It was a little earlier than the year than I'm used to going there. Usually I go in April, and they had this one in late March or mid-March. But I was still excited to go there, and I knew it was going to turn out some good limits. Got down there, fish were setting up kind of in a pre-spawn deal, and got on fish pretty good. Was in the top 10 for a lot of day 1. Ended up sliding just out of the top 10 before day 2 started. But once day 2 started, I got back into the top 10 for part of day 2. Put up another decent limit on day 2. Ended up 15th, and couldn't have been more thrilled with that. I mean, of course, I'd love to have top 3 and get my spot in the TOC right away, but 15th, if you don't win, I mean, 15th place, you get solid AOY points. I was off to a good start. I got 85 AOY points for that, and I was off and running for the year for 2021. Next up was Darnell. Darnell's in Arkansas. I had a lot of people message me like, oh man, they got one in your backyard, you're going to do good. Well, I've never really done very well on Darnell. I don't fish it very often, and I didn't really know what to expect. Of course, I was excited to not have to travel very far, but not necessarily my home waters. I fish mostly highland reservoirs up here with Table Rock, Beaver Lake, things like that. But that's the cool thing about these national trails. Even if close to home, you get to diversify and fish different kinds of water and try to figure out different things. So Darnell was in prime time, really. I mean, when fish should have been moving up to spawn or already spawning. And it turned out to be a terrible event for me. I had a pretty, decent day 1, I guess. I had a limit, but everybody had limits because of the fish were all moving up. They were easy to catch for a lot of people. I had a limit, but I was still way down the leaderboard on day 1. Ran into a buddy of mine on day 1 and kind of went with what he told me, which he was just trying to help me, and followed him to try to catch his fish on day 2. And that didn't work out. I only ended up with 3 keepers on day 2. Fell way down the list on the leaderboard. I finished 72nd place out of 120 anglers at Darnell. So knew I was going to have to call that one later in the year. Sam Rayburn was next. Always wanted to go there, and it was flooded out. It was a unique time to fish it because it was like historic flood levels. They weren't even sure if they were going to have the event, but they ended up having it anyway. And one of the silver linings to that flood was all the boat ramps were closed. So all the bass tournaments got canceled. And there was only, I think, 1 ramp open for the bass boats to even use. So basically the kayak tournament, the kayak anglers had one of the most pressured lakes in Texas, Sam Rayburn, all to ourselves for 4 days. I mean, I think I saw 2 bass boats in 4 days out there. The water was high, but it wasn't muddy, wasn't blown out. The fish were biting. A lot of people were catching them. And just like Broken Bow, I got on limits both days. I found some pretty good fish on 2 main lake points, not really back in the flooded cover. Put up 2 good limits. Ended up in the top 30 for that one. Finished 29th place. 71 or 72 AOY points for that. So 2 out of my first 3 events, solid AOY points, feeling pretty good about the year. With 2 events left in the year. I was going to take a little break from June and July. I didn't fish any of their tournaments. They were up in the far north, up in Pennsylvania and New York. I couldn't make those trips. So my next event was going to be Lacrosse in August. Got up there, pre-fished for 2 days in kind of some stormy conditions, and found a little something on day 2 of practice. And on day 1, just whacked them. I mean, I got on them pretty good on some wing dams, and I had a little backwater spot. I got on them pretty good, was in the top 10 a lot of day 1 at that tournament. Ended up slipping to 12th, but I was in 12th place, feeling really good about my chances to stay in that top 10 to 15 for day 2. If not, move up and catch a really good check. And then day 2, it just fell apart. All my good keepers turned into small fish. I struggled to even get my 5th keeper till near the end of the day. Slid from 12th to 31st. Was sitting, from the math I could do, I was in 34th place in the Angler of the Year points, or 35th place at that point. And by the math I was doing, I was either the last man in or the last man out by points. So I knew I needed to make that last event count. My last event of the year was going to be Pickwick. It was the final event on the Bass Open Series, period. And it's a place I always wanted to go. Didn't know what to expect there. I'd never been there. Got there, and I mean, I was lost from the jump. Couldn't find keeper fish. I got a few bites the first day of practice and the second day, but they were all small fish. Most didn't even measure. So I was kind of lost. I got a little information on Saturday or Friday night before the tournament about kind of a community hole where there should be some fish where I could at least get some keepers in the boat. I went there Saturday blind, caught a decent keeper early, but didn't get another keeper bite the rest of the day. Was just lost and felt like I was just on a different planet after looking at the leaderboard and seeing all the fish that everybody was catching. So bailed out of there after day 1. Didn't even fish day 2 because it was a lost cause. If I couldn't make the top 25 in that last event, I knew that I had no chance of improving my standing. And I think after day 1, I was 61st place or something like that. So kind of put up the white flag, head back to Arkansas. And I kind of thought about the season on the way back to Arkansas, and over the last week or so about, where did I go wrong or what lessons did I learn. Before I get into things that went wrong or lessons learned, talk about a few highlights of the season. Broken Bow. I was so thrilled they even had a tournament there, and loved the fact that I did well there. It made me feel good that I could kind of recreate success that I'd had there in the past. That lake just suits me. It's not a grass lake. It's a I guess a highland reservoir in Ozark or Ouachita Mountain lake. It's got a lot of rocks in it, and clear water. That's kind of stuff I'm used to fishing and feel very comfortable there. So really happy with that finish. And then the Sam Rayburn trip had to be another highlight just because of the fact that we had it to ourselves. I stayed in the house with a bunch of great guys, Ryan Lambert, David Cruz, Mark Springer, a bunch of guys that friends of mine that we got to hang out a few days at the house at Rayburn, had a blast. And like I said, having the lake to ourselves, catching a bunch of fish, that was awesome. So lessons learned, I think I mentioned this in a video earlier this year, but you gotta fail faster. I mean, you cannot be stuck or stubborn on a pattern or lure or spot that you're fishing. You have to be able to fail faster and move on. You have to be able to fail faster and move spots or change techniques or whatever you're doing. You cannot be stubborn and stuck on what you're doing for hours and hours and let your day get burned and disappear. Something I heard on a podcast, actually on the way to that Pickwick event, that I never really thought about is it was Drew Gregory was on, I think, Paddle and Fin, and he mentioned always leaving yourself an out at these tournaments. Don't ever get too far from a ramp or too stuck on an area that you don't have an out in case things go sideways, in case it's blown out or they're just not there that day. Always give yourselves an out. And looking back, I didn't give myself enough of those. I got too far from the ramp or too locked into one area and kind of stayed stubborn with it. So I always give myself an out. I'm going to really focus on that in 2022. And that kind of goes along with the next one, which is I'm going to try to stop being so spot dependent. I'm always looking for spots rather than patterns. I didn't even think about that till a long drive home. I tried to kind of relate what happened in especially the events that didn't go so well. And I got in these areas and I tried to just will these spots that I had found that I got a few good bites on into being the deal on tournament day. And you can't do that. If they're not there, they're not there. You're not going to be able to just pound them until they show up or just cross your fingers. You cannot be stubborn like that. So I got to stop being so spot dependent and be willing to move and be flexible, which kind of goes back to that always have an out thing that Drew was talking about. And something else I want to do that I thought about is I'm going to have to streamline my tackle in 22. I'm kind of a hoarder. I bring too many rods probably and a lot of tackle, which makes it hard to have an out. If you're trying to move spots or relocate ramps and you're putting your stuff on the trailer and you got all this stuff behind you and in your boat, makes it a lot more difficult. So I'm going to try to streamline that down a little bit. And that's tough. That's going to be tough for me because I like having everything. But I think it's going to be important for 22. And last but certainly not least, Darnell and Pickwick, my two worst events by far. Both will have something in common, which is they are river impoundments. So Darnell's on the Arkansas River, Pickwick's on the Tennessee River. They're very current dependent. There's grass in them. It's blatantly obvious I'm terrible at fishing those kind of impoundments. So I've got to get better. I'm going to have to go down and spend a little more time at Darnell. Just spend a lot of time on the internet learning, trying not to fit a square peg in a round hole, and using the techniques I would use on these clear water lakes and things like that. And you know, it's funny because I'm very comfortable fishing rivers. If it's just a straight river, I don't have a problem with that. But those locked off reservoirs, I guess you'd call it, or lakes like Pickwick and Dardanelle, I've always struggled on those. I don't know, but I've talked to a few people, gotten a few tips and ways, things to look for going forward, and I'm going to try to expand on that by doing some map study and some YouTube study and whatever in the off season, because I know next year there's going to be some tournaments on those kind of lakes, and I'm gonna have to be ready. But yeah, I ended up 41st place in the Angler of the Year, 8 points from the last Tournament of Champions spot. Very disappointed to say the least. I was all about making that Tournament of Champions. I'm still all about making it. I'm so thrilled for all my friends that did make it. It's cool to see a bunch of them have success and get there. I mean, I still finished 41st, looking on the positive side of things, out of 600 and something people that fished the Hobie Bass Open Series. So nothing to hang your head about. You know, sometimes you fall short of goals, but all we can do is learn from it, adapt, and try to get better the next time. So can't wait for that 2022 schedule to release, get back after it and try to qualify next year. As always, thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and subscribe button before you go. Thanks, guys.